in state. The Little Minister by J. M. Barrie. Chapter 6, in which the soldiers meet the Amazons of Thrums. Dow looked shamefacedly at the minister, and then set off up the square. "Where are you going, Rob?" "To gie myself up. I maun do something to let you see there's one man in Thrums that has mair faith in you than in Flisk Mahoy." "And only one, Rob. But I don't know that they want to arrest you." I had a hand in tying the policeman to the—" "I want to hear nothing about that," Gavin said quickly. "Will I hide then?" "I dare not advise you to do that. It would be wrong." Half a score of fugitives tore past the townhouse and were out of sight without a cry. There was a tread of heavier feet, and a dozen soldiers, with several policemen and 2 prisoners, appeared suddenly on the north side of the square. "Rob," cried the minister in desperation, "run!" When the soldiers reached the townhouse, where they locked up their prisoners, Dow was skulking eastward, and Gavin running down the brae. "They're fechting," he was told. "They're fechting on the brae. The soldiers is firing. A man's killed." But this was an exaggeration. The brae, though short, is very steep. There is a hedge on one side of it, from which the land falls away, and on the other side a hillock. Gavin reached the scene to see the soldiers marching down the brae, guarding a small body of policemen. The armed weavers were retreating before them. 100 women or more were on the hillock, shrieking and gesticulating. Gavin joined them, calling on them not to fling the stones they had begun to gather. The armed men broke into a rabble, flung down their weapons, and fled back toward the townhouse. Here they almost ran against the soldiers in the square, who again forced them into the brae. Finding themselves about to be wedged between the 2 forces, some crawled through the hedge, where they were instantly seized by policemen. Others sought to climb up the hillock and then escape into the country. The policemen clamoured after them. The men were too frightened to fight, but a woman seized a policeman by the waist and flung him head foremost among the soldiers. One of these shouted "Fire!" but the captain cried "No!" Then came showers of missiles from the women. They stood their ground and defended the retreat of scared men. Who flung the first stone is not known, but it is believed to have been the Egyptian. The policemen were recalled, and the whole body ordered to advance down the brae. Thus the weavers, who had not escaped at once, were driven before them, and soon hemmed in between the 2 bodies of soldiers, when they were easily captured. But for 2 minutes there was a thick shower of stones and clods of earth. It was ever afterwards painful to Gavin to recall this scene, but less on account of the shower of stones than because of the flight of one divot in it. He had been watching the handsome young captain, Halliwell, riding with his men, admiring him too for his coolness. This coolness exasperated the gypsy, who twice flung at Halliwell and missed him. He rode on, smiling contemptuously. "Oh, if I could only fling straight," the Egyptian moaned. Then she saw the minister by her side, and in the tick of a clock something happened that can never be explained. For the moment Gavin was so lost in misery over the probable effect of the night's rioting that he had forgotten where he was. Suddenly the Egyptian's beautiful face was close to his, and she pressed a divot into his hand, at the same time pointing at the officer and whispering, "Hit him." Gavin flung the clod of earth and hit Halliwell on the head. I say I cannot explain this. I tell what happened, and add with thankfulness that only the Egyptian witnessed the deed. Gavin, I suppose, had flung the divot before he could stay his hand. Then he shrank in horror. "Woman!" he cried again. "You are a dear," said she, and vanished. By the time Gavin was breathing freely again, the lockup was crammed with prisoners, and the riot act had been read from the townhouse stair. It is still remembered that the Baron Bailie, to whom this duty fell, had got no further than "Victoria by the grace of God," when the paper was struck out of his hands. When a stirring event occurs up here, we smack our lips over it for months, and so I could still write a history of that memorable night in Thrums. I could tell how the doctor, a man whose shoulders often looked as if they had been caught in a shower of tobacco ash, brought me the news to the schoolhouse, and now when I crossed the fields to Dumfounder Waster Lunny with it, I found Birse, the post, reeling off the story to him as fast as a fisher could let out line. I know who was the first woman on the Marrywell Bride to hear the horn, and how she woke her husband, and who heard it first at the Dunhead and the Tenements, with what they immediately said and did. I had from Dyke Dutcher's own lips the curious story of his sleeping placidly through the whole disturbance, and on wakening in the morning yoking to his loom as usual, and also his statement that such ill luck was enough to shake a man's faith in religion. The police had knowledge that enabled them to go straight to the houses of the weavers wanted, but they sometimes brought away the wrong man, for such of the people as did not escape from the town had swapped houses for the night, a trick that served them better than all our drilling on the hill. Old Yule's son escaped by burying himself in a peat rick, and Snecky Hobart by pretending that he was a sack of potatoes. Less fortunate was Sanders Webster, the mole-catcher already mentioned. Sanders was really an innocent man. He had not even been in Thrums on the night of the rising against the manufacturers, but thinking that the outbreak was to be left unpunished, he wanted his share in the glory of it. So he had boasted of being a ringleader until many believed him, including the authorities. His braggadocio undid him. He was run to earth in a pigsty and got 9 months. With the other arrests I need not concern myself, for they have no part in the story of the little minister. While Gavin was with the families whose breadwinners were now in the lock-up, a cell that was usually crammed on fair nights and empty for the rest of the year, the sheriff and Halliwell were in the round room of the townhouse, not in good temper. They spoke loudly, and some of their words sank into the cell below. "The whole thing has been a fiasco," the sheriff was heard saying, "owing to our failing to take them by surprise. Why, 3/4 of those taken will have to be liberated, and we have to let the worst offenders slip through our hands." "Well," answered Halliwell, who was wearing a heavy cloak, "I have brought your policemen into the place, and that is all I undertook to do." "You brought them, but at the expense of alarming the countryside. I wish we had come without you." "Nonsense. My men advanced like ghosts. Could your police have come down that brae alone tonight?" "Yes, because it would have been deserted. Your soldiers, I tell you, have done the mischief. This woman, who so many of our prisoners admit brought the news of our coming, must either have got it from one of your men or have seen them on the march. The men did not know their destination. True, she might have seen us despite our precautions, but you forget that she told them how we were to act in the event of our being seen. That is what perplexes me." "Yes, and me too, for it was a close secret between you and me and Lord Rintoul, and not a half a dozen others." "Well, find the woman, and we shall get the explanation. If she is still in town she cannot escape, for my men are everywhere." "She was seen 10 minutes ago." "Then she is ours. I say, Rick, if I were you I would set all my prisoners free and take away a cartload of their wives instead. I have only seen the backs of the men of Thrums, but on my word I very nearly ran away from the women. Hello, I believe one of your police has caught our virago single-handed." So Halliwell exclaimed, hearing someone shout, "This is the rascal!" But it was not the Egyptian who was then thrust into the round room. It was John Dunwoody, looking very sly. Probably there was not, even in Thrums, a cannier man than Dunwoody. His religious views were those of Cruikshank's, but he went regularly to church, on the off chance of there being a God after all, so I'm safe, whatever side may be wrong. "This is the man," explained a policeman, "who brought the alarm. He admits himself having been in Tilliedrum just before we started." "Your name, my man?" the sheriff demanded. "It micht be John Dunwoody," the tinsmith answered cautiously. "But is it?" "I dinna say it's no." "You were in Tilliedrum this evening?" "I micht hae been." "Were you?" "I'll swear to nothing." "Why not?" "Because I'm a canny man." "Into the cell with him," Halliwell cried, losing patience. "Leave him to me," said the sheriff. "I understand the sort of man. Now, Dunwoody, what were you doing in Tilliedrum?" "I was taking my laddie down to be prentice to a rider there," answered Dunwoody, fallen into the sheriff's net. "What are you yourself?" "I micht be a tinsmith to trade." "And you, a mere tinsmith, dare to tell me The lawyer was willing to take your son into his office? Be cautious, Dunwoodie. Weel, then, the laddie's highly edicated, and I high siller, and that's how the writer was to take him and make a gentleman of him. I learned from the neighbours, the policeman explained, that this is partly true, but what makes us suspect him is this. He left the laddie at Tilladrum, and yet when he came home the first person he sees at the fireside is the laddie himself. The laddie had run home, and the reason plainly was that he had heard of our preparations and wanted to alarm the town. There seems something in this, Dunwoodie, the sheriff said, and if you cannot explain it, I must keep you in custody. I'll make a clean breast of it, Dunwoodie replied, seeing that in this matter truth was best. The laddie was terrible against being made a gentleman, and when he saw the kind of life he would hae to lead, clean hands, clean dickies, and no gutters on his breeks, his heart took mair scunner at gentility than ever, and he ran hame. I was mad when I saw him at the fireside, but he says to me, "How would you like to be a gentleman yourself, father?" he says, and that so affected me, I'm to gie him his ain way. Another prisoner, Dave Langlands, was confronted with Dunwoodie. "John Dunwoodie's as innocent as I am myself," Dave said, "and I'm most meekly innocent. It was not John, but the Egyptian that gave the alarm. I tell you what, sheriff, if it'll make me innocenter like, I'll picture the Egyptian to you just as I saw her, and syne you'll be able to catch her easier." "You are an honest fellow," said the sheriff. "Oh, I only wish I had the whipping of him," growled Halliwell, who was of a generous nature. "For what business had she," continued Dave righteously, "to meddle in other folks' business? She's no a Thrums lassie, and so I say, let the law take its course on her." "Will you listen to such a cur, Rick?" asked Halliwell. Certainly. Speak out, Langlands." "Weel, then, I was in the windmill the nicht." "You were a watcher?" "I happened to be in a windmill wi' another man," Dave went on, avoiding the officer's question. "What was his name?" demanded Halliwell. "It was the Egyptian I was to tell you about," Dave said, looking to the sheriff. "Ah, yes, you only tell tales about women," said Halliwell. "Strange women," corrected Dave. "Well, we was there, and it would maybe be 12 o'clock, and we was speaking but about lawful things, when we heard someone running yont the road. I keeked through a hole in the door, and I saw it was an Egyptian lassie that I had never clapped eye on before. She saw the licht in the window, and she cried, 'Hi, you billies in the windmill, the soldiers is coming.' I fell in a fricht, but the other man opened the door, and again she cries, 'The soldiers is coming. Quick, or you'll be ta'en.' At that the other man up and wi' his bonnet and ran, but I didna make off so smart." "You had to pick yourself up first?" suggested the officer. "Sal, it was the lassie picked me up. Ay, and she picked up a horn at the same time. 'Blaw on that,' she cried, 'and alarm the town.' But, sheriff, I didna do it. Na, I had ower muckle respect for the law." "In other words," said Halliwell, "you also bolted and left the gypsy to blow the horn herself." "I dinna deny but what I made my feet my friend, but it wasna her that blew the horn. I ken that, for I looked back and saw her trying to do it, but she couldna. She didna ken the way." "Then who did blow it?" "The first man she met, I suppose. We kent that the horn was to be signal, except Wearyworld. He's police, so we kept it frae him." "Is that all you saw of the woman?" "Ay, for I ran straucht to my garret, and there your men took me. Can I gie hame now, sheriff?" "No, you cannot. Describe the woman's appearance." "She had a heap of rowan berries stuck in her hair, and I think she had on a green wrapper and a red shawl. She had a most extraordinary face. I canna exact describe it, for she would be laughing one second and syne solemn the next. I tell you, her face changed as quick as you could turn the page of a book. Ay, here comes Wearyworld to speak up for me." Wearyworld entered cheerfully. "This is the local policeman," a Tilliedrum officer said. "We have been searching for him everywhere and only found him now." "Where have you been?" asked the sheriff wrathfully. "Where most honest men is at this hour," replied Wearyworld. in my bed." "How dare you ignore your duty at such a time?" "It's a long story," the policeman answered pleasantly, in anticipation of a talk at last. "Answer me in a word." "In a word!" cried the policeman, quite crestfallen. "It canna be done. You'll need to cross-examine me too. Is my lawful richt?" "I'll take you to the Tilliedrum gaol for your share in this night's work if you do not speak to the purpose. Why did you not hasten to our assistance?" "As sure as death I never kent you was here. I was up the Roods on my rounds when I heard an awful din down in the square, and thinks I, there's rough characters about, and the place for honest folk is their bed. So to my bed I gaed, and I was in't when your men gripped me." "We must see into this before we leave. In the meantime you will act as a guide to my searchers. Stop. Do you know anything of this Egyptian?" "What Egyptian? Is it the lassie with rowans in her hair?" "The same. Have you seen her?" "That I have. There's nothing agin her, is there? Whatever it is, I'll uphold she didna do it, for a simpler, franker spoken crittur couldna be." "Never mind what I want her for. When did you see her?" "It would be about 12 o'clock," began Wearyworld unctuously, "when I was in the Roods. No lang afore I heard the disturbance in the square. I was standing in the middle of the road, wondering how the door of the windmill was swinging open, when she came up to me. 'A fine nicht for the time of year,' I says to her, for nobody but the minister had spoken to me a day. 'A very fine nicht,' says she, very frank, though she was breathing quick like, as if she had been running. 'You'll be police?' says she. 'I am,' says I, 'and what be you?' 'I'm just a poor gypsy lassie,' says she. 'And what's that in your hand?' says I. 'It's a horn I found in the wood,' says she, 'but it's rusty and winna blow.' I laughed at her ignorance, and says I warrant I can blow it. 'I dinna believe you,' she says. 'Gie me haud o't,' says I, and she gae it to me, and I blew some bonny blasts on't, and you see she didna ken the way it. 'Thank you kindly,' says she, and she ran away without even minding to take the horn back again." "You incredible idiot!" cried the sheriff. "Then it was you who gave the alarm?" "What hae I done to madden you?" honest Wearyworld asked in perplexity. "Get out of my sight, sir," roared the sheriff. But the captain laughed. "I like your doughty policeman, Richt," he said. "Hi, obliged friend, let us hear how this gypsy struck you. How was she dressed?" "She was snod, but no unco snod," replied Wearyworld stiffly. "I don't understand you." "I mean she was couthie, but no siren order." "What on earth is that?" "Weel, a tasty stocky, but gay or a put on." "What language are you speaking, you enigma?" "I'm saying she was naturally a bonny bit kimmer, rather than happet up to the nines." "Oh, go away," cried Halliwell, whereupon Wearyworld descended the stair haughtily, declaring that the sheriff was an unreasonable man, and that he was a queer captain who did not understand the English language. "Can I gae home now, sheriff?" asked Langlands hopefully. "Take this fellow back to his cell," Rick directed shortly, "and whatever else you do, see that you capture this woman. Halliwell, I'm going out to look for her myself. Confound it, what are you laughing at?" "At the way this vixen has slipped through your fingers." "Not quite that, sir, not quite that. She is in Thrums still, and I swear I'll have her before day breaks. See to it, Halliwell, that if she is brought here in my absence, she does not slip through your fingers." "If she is brought here," said Halliwell, mocking him, "you must return and protect me. It would be cruelty to leave a poor soldier in the hands of a woman of Thrums." "She is not a Thrums woman. You have been told so a dozen times." "Then I am not afraid." In the round room, which is oblong, there is a throne on which the bailie sits when he dispenses justice. It is swathed in red cloth that give it the appearance of a pulpit. Left to himself, Halliwell flung off his cloak, and taking a chair near this dais, rested his legs on the bare wooden table, one on each side of the lamp. He was still in this position when the door opened and two policemen thrust the Egyptian into the room. Chapter 7